Thank you everyone for being here for today's Quick Learn series. Today we're doing an overview of survey, forms, and polling tools. Tennille's put the link to a survey up in the chat. I'll show you that again as we get to it a little bit later in the presentation. Starting off, my name is Susie Johannes, and with me is Tennille Fincham. We're both technology instructors here at KU. We've met many of you in our instructor-led classes, and so we're excited to see you here in today's webinar. If you haven't been to one of these before, these Quick Learn sessions, they usually focus on a specific topic and are usually more presentation style, whereas our instructor-led classes are more hands-on. So today I'll be doing a demo of some of these different options. And as we go, we'll pause for questions. You're also welcome to enter any questions through the chat, either when we pause or as they come up, and we'll get to them. You may have noticed we are recording this session. After the session is over, we'll post the recording on our Quick Learn page on the IT website, and we'll also send the link to that page as a follow-up to everyone here, as well as any answers to any questions that we didn't get an answer to in today's session. Just a few meeting tips if you're new to Skype for Business meetings. It's a good idea to maximize your window as large as possible so you can see my screen as large as possible. Also, everyone should be muted at this point. That's a good option to be muted. We're asking that you submit any questions through the chat. If for any reason you'd want to check to see that you're muted, you could see that the microphone at the bottom should have a slash through it. Like I mentioned, we will be asking you to submit questions through the chat. To see that chat window, you may have to click on the little message icon in the lower left-hand corner. And then for those of you joining with the Skype web app through the browser, you may need to, in the top right-hand corner, click on the presentation option icon and choose presentation view in order to kind of get our pictures out of the way and see more of my screen. Just an overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to first talk about kind of a definition to work from that is the differences between surveys, forms, and polls. So we'll kind of be working through that shared definition as we talk about the different solutions. We'll start with the CMS Web Forms. We'll go into some other different types of forms commonly used. The order I have here isn't the exact order that we will cover them. So we'll do an overview of all of these or many of these, and then at the end we'll kind of talk about some more things to consider. In this presentation, I'm going to be speaking more just to the technical considerations to take into account. I'm not going to be talking about actual survey design. I'm not an expert on that. There's books and resources on campus that can help you with that. I will talk about some policies and procedures on campus, but I won't be doing a deep level overview of everything you need to do in order to launch one of these on campus. So I'll be speaking more to the technical considerations as we move through these. We thought it'd be kind of a fun option to do a poll as part of today's session. So I've set up this poll here. If you will go out and fill that out, and we'll look at the answers here. Tennille will also maybe post that link in the chat one more time. This poll that I've set up is using the Forms app in my community, and we'll look more at that. It has a Google address because I use Google URL shortener in order to make it a shorter URL, but it is within my community here at KU. So I'm going to give you a minute, maybe two, to make sure you get that filled out. That way we can use the results as part of today's session. Okay, so if you're still filling out that poll, go ahead and do that. I'm going to move on to the next slide. I just want to talk about some definitions when we're talking about surveys, forms, and polls. And for the most part, for all of these, what we're doing is we're gathering information, so that's the kind of common thing. With surveys, what we're trying to do is usually, I'm going to say something more complex than just a poll. So there may be multiple questions. There might be a variety of different question formats. So maybe there's scales and ratings. Maybe there's, choices. Maybe there's yes, no. Maybe there's text entries, that type of thing. With survey tools, they often allow for logic or skip branching so that if someone answers no to a certain question, they can jump to another question and skip over more questions about the things they answered no to. They often offer the ability to see a breakdown of the responses, usually visually in charts and graphs, and you may be able to generate automatic reports. Some survey tools may have the ability to help you manage your lists if you are emailing out this survey to a wide list so that the email can be anonymous, or sorry, the respondent can remain anonymous, but you can see at least how many respondents you've had and how many have completed the survey. There's sometimes the ability to have role-based access to the results. Um, and surveys often are anonymous. They don't have to be, but survey tools often give you that option. With polling I usually lump in the category of being either a simple question or questions. They may be used to, in training, test the recall of concepts. So there's different kind of polling options that are grouped under this umbrella of classroom response systems. We won't talk a whole lot about those, but the big thing about polling is there's two different distinctions. One, there's real-time synchronous polling. So while we're in this meeting space, we'll launch a poll in Skype for Business, and we'll be able to see results live as people are filling them out. And then there's polling options that are more asynchronous. So really simple surveys or questionnaires that people can answer at any time. So in this way, a poll is a type of survey, but I'm considering it just to be a very, very simple version. And finally, there's forms. So with forms, you usually have maybe a variety of question formats, maybe the ability to upload files or pictures, possibly the ability to calculate fields as they're being entered. So usually the distinction with forms is that they are integrated into a larger business process, or a request kind of process. And usually you need to know who's submitting the form. Usually it can't be anonymous because you actually have to follow up, take some course of action because that form was completed and submitted. Forms can also be used to do things that surveys do. So I've seen forms set up to ask questions, to get feedback, that type of thing. However, usually surveys aren't used to do things that forms do. So hopefully that will become more clearer as we go. But those are kind of the distinctions that I'm making as I cover these. And some of the tools that we'll cover, they could fall into both or both survey and forms categories. But there's definitely tools that are better for what we think of commonly as surveys versus forms. And actually, before we go on, let me just check that that poll or that survey that we did. And I'll skip here. So this is a kind of cool tool. This is one that we'll cover. It's called Forms, and it's available by logging in through mycommunity.ku.edu. It's kind of similar to a Google form in that it can be very simple, and you can embed it on a web page. You can make it anonymous and public, or in our system, you can make it so people have to log in order to see. Here I'm on the summaries page, so I can see 14 responses. And here I get just some quick breakdowns of these questions. So which tools do you currently use? It looks like SurveyMonkey is the top one, followed by Qualtrics and that type of thing. Um, and so then we have Doodle polls, paper forms, CMS Web Forms, Google Forms. Okay, that's good to know. Um, Here, which tools are you the most interested in? It looks like it does some kind of interesting things when I hover over. Um, Let me see here. So it looks like many of you are interested in other options. Maybe I should check and see what those other options are. So I can go into details. All fillable forms, Qualtrics, CMS Web Forms. Oh, I see. Okay. Let me go into this one. Well, I don't know exactly how it's allowing me to drill down into those. So, I'm guessing this is the other, but we'll cover most of those as we go. What's that? Oh yeah, I'm on, so this is the responses tab that we're on here versus the question tab if you, to set up the questions. Okay, so that's good to know. Um, For those of you who are using Qualtrics, who are interested in Qualtrics, I'm going to cover it a little bit, but I'm not going to go into much detail, so it'll be towards the end. But just so you know, that's that. So let's start. We're going to start just by talking about forms and kind of maybe building in complexity. One thing I don't really have in here is just the ability, you can create paper forms, print them out, have people fill them out, submit them, that type of thing. Usually the big thing with those paper forms is if you want to actually do some summarizing of the data, you'll have to have someone manually key those in or a student enter that information, so they can be a little time intensive if you're doing a large kind of scale implementation. Those printed forms oftentimes originate in Word, and within Word, you have the ability to create forms that are fillable in Word. So usually with those, the people who access them are people who have Word and then they have the file. So you could put that file on a web page to download. You could email it to people. You could make it available in a shared location. To set them up, you usually set them up within Word, and we'll take a look at that. Um, there's also the ability to add in fillable fields where you can actually like have a blank field where you can fill it in. To access the results, you'll see those in Word. And then, some pros and cons. The pro is that, you're working in Word, which may be in a software that you're comfortable with, and you can format it in a way that it can be easily printable, and you can control the formatting. There's also a variety of templates available in Word, which we'd highly suggest you start from or use to get ideas for your form. The hard things, it can be difficult to extract the data. You may have to go into each Word form and copy and paste entries. And the person has to have the form, they have to have Word. If you just set it up in Word as a form, they may need to have that software in order to fill it out and then email it back to you or something like that. So let's take a look at this Word form. I have the screenshot here. This is one I just downloaded as a template. So when you go to File, New, you can see all these templates here. What I did was just search for form and use that as a starting point. So I just found this walkathon fundraiser. I got a little preview here, and then I can just click create. Now, there's some different ways you can set up these forms. This is a really simple way to do kind of a form-like function. In this case, this is just a table, and so people, if they have Word, they can put the name of someone here and just fill out the cells. They can even use the tab key just like they're used to using in Excel. Up here, this is a different option, and these are those fillable fields. So here, there's a field for the organization name we can fill out, the year, so we can just type over those and fill those out. To find those entry fields, it's a little bit hidden. You have to be able to see this developer tab. And so usually in order to see that tab, because by default it's hidden, you have to right click somewhere in the ribbon area, say customize the ribbon, and then usually you have to select this box here for developer in order to see that. So it's in that developer tab that you see options, and here they're grayed out. I have to actually go into design mode in order to add those different fields so that people can click them and add information. The big thing I would recommend is to either use a table or to use this that's a field that they can replace, as opposed to sometimes I see fields or forms created where you'll say name, and then the person who creates it will just put manually enter underscores for the name. And that just creates a little bit of a bad experience, because if I start typing in my name here, then I either have to, delete these extra things. Maybe if I'm really concerned, I can try to underline it to make it look like that. But rather than doing that, like we see in this example, what they've done is just create a table here that probably has 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, 5 cells in just one row, and they've just added underlines under the cells where they're asking people to fill out information. So that's a lot easier and nicer to fill out in Word rather than trying to do this kind of underline stuff. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about Adobe Fillable Forms, and it's kind of a good segue because oftentimes with these Word forms, instead of having someone fill them out in Word and need to open them up in that software, you can take that form that you design or lay out in Word, you can save it or print it as a PDF, and then you can turn it into Adobe Fillable Form. Now, the Adobe Fillable Form, it has the benefit in that you can fill it out. Anyone can fill it out using the free version of Adobe Acrobat Reader. So you just need that Adobe Acrobat Reader, which comes with many computers and devices. To get the file, you have to download or have the file emailed to you. So you'll have to have that PDF. You may have it in a shared location. To set them up, that's usually the hard part. You have to have either DC or the Pro version, Adobe Acrobat Pro 11 or 12, whatever. So usually you'll start with a formatted document that's made into a PDF, and then in Adobe Acrobat Pro or DC, you will use the form recognition in order to start laying out the fields. To access the results, it all depends on how you distribute the form. Most of the time, people seem to, download the form, fill it out, email it back. There are some things that you can do within Adobe that would maybe allow you to get more summarized results, but you'd probably want to work with your local tech staff because some of them may require some additional setup. So the pros are the ability, again, to lock down formatting. So exactly how I see the form here is how it will print out. So that means people could either print it out or fill it out digitally. The cons, and I'll show you this, is it can be really difficult to modify these. It also gives the ability to do calculations if you get into the individual field properties, but that doesn't always work as expected. They may not be great for mobile devices depending on how it's formatted or how it's distributed. And then finally, Adobe does give you an option to sign PDFs, but at KU that's not really an approved thing to do. So you may end up with a person printing it out anyway, signing it, scanning it in again, and re-emailing it in order to submit it. So the example I have here is just a fillable form for this travel reimbursement. I just took a form that was available on campus and kind of made that into a form. And so I'm here in Pro DC. This view I have now is exactly how everyone will see it. You can fill it out by, clicking in any of these blue fields. There's yes, no options. And how I made this into a form, in DC, these little panels or tools are usually kind of hidden. So there's a tiny little arrow over here where I can expand it. I use this prepare form option, and when I first did that, I was able to just recognize all the fields, and it recognized most of them. From there, if the field was off or, not aligned correctly, I would resize it. So once I was in this editing kind of view, I see the names of all the fields, the handles for the fields. For any one of these fields, I can right-click and select the properties. I can change, maybe the name. Most likely, maybe I want to change options. So maybe it's multi-line. Maybe it's something like that. Or there's a formatting there's a formatting tab where I could choose to say this is only a number, this is only supposed to be a date, blah, blah, blah. Here on the side, we see a list of all those fields, and the important thing about this is that when someone is filling out the form, the order here represents the order of the form fields if someone's tabbing across to enter the information. So if you have a form and when you tab, it jumps way down to another field instead of kind of going in the order you want, it's because you need to come in here and edit this order in this field list. The other big thing with doing this form recognition a lot of times is that however big of spacing you have in your layout is as big as the text will show. So if I had a really big field here versus here, it may change the font size and look kind of unappealing. The easy way to fix all that is when you're in that edit view, you can actually select all fields at once and edit the properties. And there you can change the font size so that everything is the same font size. The other big thing with forms is usually I save a version of my form without any fields and then a version of my form with fields. And so the trickiest part about these forms is how difficult it can be to modify them. So if I have a new field that I want to enter, I would have to go back to Word, change my initial layout, or I could try to do it in here. I mean, there's different edit PDF options, so I could try to do it in here. But what I'm going to end up doing is moving all these fields down. I'm going to have to do that, or maybe even just recreate the fillable fields to begin with if I go back to Word. So it can require a lot of work just to make one seemingly easy modification. I did want to point out in the preparation ones, there's different buttons here for distribute and track. If you're trying to use any of those options, that's when I would use or ask for help from your local tech staff because they can help you figure out how to make those work if you need to make them work. I think I have 2 more examples of forms, and then we're going to take a break for questions. So the next type of form I have is kind of building on that, and that's Excel forms. So with Excel forms, they're really just worksheets that can be fillable in Excel. So the person who can fill them out would be the person who has the file and who has Excel. That file, you could either email it to people, allow it to be downloaded. You can also, put it in a shared location. To set them up in Excel, you could just set them up like a worksheet and just allow people to fill them in. If you want to kind of lock them down so that people can't fill or change information, you may need to use some of the security features in order to lock certain cells. There's also advanced things you can do like conditional formatting, data validation in order to make the options available more consistent. And other options you can do. Usually to view the results, you will have to open that Excel form. You could copy and paste the things that you need into another form. You may be able to summarize by, combining a bunch of different worksheets into a workbook and then creating a summary page. The pros are that you can do kind of inline calculations. So we'll see that in the example I have here. Um, the format, if you're going from Excel to Excel, that might be helpful to have the form in Excel so that you can copy and paste more easily. The con was that users are going to have Excel to fill out. So let me show you an example of that I worked on with a customer or someone here at KU. This is just a form that someone could use in order to submit different check deposits. And so there's options here. They can fill out the number, just like Excel, the name. When it comes to these cells, this is using something called data validation. So they can either say yes or no. If they enter yes, this field is highlighted, and that happens because of conditional formatting. So within conditional formatting, there's a rule that says if this cell is yes, then highlight this cell blue. And it works all the way down. Once we had it set up, we just copied it down to every cell below. Same thing with this one. If they answer yes, it fills out blue. If they answer no, nothing happens because they don't need to fill that out. And then with this one, there's different amounts that can be filled out. It has that number formatting already. Sorry about that. And then here, because it's an Excel form, we can just have the sum happening as it goes. We started off with a template in Excel, and kind of a detailed note is that this is a table. And because this is a table, we have this total row here. And so it's summing here. It's also, once I add in some more fields here, this cell is counting how many cells here have information. So it's saying how many transactions based on how many cells in this column have information. So the big thing with this form is that the user wanted to make it so that only some cells were fillable. And so to do that, you have to do two things. One, by default, there's this ability to lock and unlock cells, and by default, all cells are locked, but we don't usually see that or encounter it at all because the worksheet itself isn't protected. So it's a two-step process. One, and you can get to this unlock lock by popping out the full formatting panel here, but here under the protection tab, we see the option locked or unlocked. So for this form, if I really want to, make this more formal or so that it can't be edited as easily, I would come here and I would unlock the cells that I want to be filled in by unselecting the box. And then the second step is under the review tab, I would have to come in here and protect this sheet. And that allows me to make it so that people can only select locked cells, select unlocked cells, and they will be only able to insert information in unlocked cells. And then I would enter a password. I guess the difficult thing about this is that if you lose that password, you have to recreate it. That password doesn't integrate with anything else. So, as far as I know, so it can be a kind of a hazard. One more option before we take a break for some more questions. CMS Web Forms, that's another commonly used form. It looks like many of you are using those. So those web forms, you usually have to be an editor or a site admin on a KU site that uses our content management system, which uses the open source system Drupal. Once you have the web form set up and published, anyone using a web browser or a mobile device can complete it. And editors, site admins, they can set them up. We have the full instructions on the CMS website. To access the results, you can have them sent to one or multiple email addresses. So as people submit their answer for the survey or for the web form, you can have that submission emailed to one or multiple people. In addition, Editors, site owners can always go to the site, see all results, and download submissions. So it can be easily accessed by your people who you want to respond to it. They just need the URL. You can use it to submit files. I meant to fill in this number here. There is some cutoff for how large those files can be. And because of that ability to send emails to different email addresses, users can get real-time notification when someone submits the form. The cons, they're best for simple things, I would say. Multiple choice can be a little tricky. And file submissions, you may have to manually go in there and download each file individually. It could be possible that that's how you'll have to retrieve your files. So let me show you a couple examples that I've actually worked with before. Here, we're going to eventually move away from this form, but in order to request desk side coaching, department training, or if you had an academic course, Tennille and I have this fillable form. So there's different fields that are required. Once they move past this, they get to the next page where they can select one or multiple topics. So that's an example of a form. When it gets filled out, it just gets emailed to our training inbox. Sorry about this. Other things that I've used forms to do, let me show you this form that that we set up for a conference, and I apologize, I think it logged me out. Okay. So let me show you this. It's kind of more of an advanced form, I'd say. But for this workshop, we wanted people to submit their suggestions, proposals for workshops that they would like to hold during this conference. And so it has some information at the beginning about guidelines, materials, that type of thing. And then here it has this ability to, these are all required fields. So instead of having this come in through emails in a non-consistent or standard way, this web form really helped us make sure we got all the information we needed. They can have titles. We set up different options for which categories, they were going to put them in. Equipment, which dates they wanted, descriptions, that type of thing. Here we don't have it. We could have had them actually attach a document with the information. I've done this before with speaker info for conferences, where speakers can actually submit their picture, maybe their bio, maybe even their presentation slides, so that you can get that information in a more standard way rather than having someone have to email and remind people and check to make sure they got all the information they needed. So let me pause for some questions. I also have a poll I'll switch to. Kind of builds on the same kind of thing. So, and it gives us another option for a poll. So this is a, real-time poll. If you want to, it will only be PC users or people joining through the web browser that will be able to vote on these. But if you will, vote for an option by choosing a radio button. Great. Well, let me just going to close this poll and I'm going to show you the results. So this poll, and we'll talk more about these, but this is a Skype for Business meeting poll, and it allows us real-time anonymous feedback. So we can see, 9% paper forms, 9% word forms. It's nice. It gives me the percentages. So initially I had the poll open. I had to close the poll and show it to everyone in order for them to see see this. Oh yeah, and great question, Lori, about kind of like ADA compliance and different options to consider with that for these different survey and poll uses. Um, let me double check with our specialist here and just kind of put together some thoughts on maybe some things to consider. I don't know for sure if there's one that works better than others, so let me do some more research and find out for sure. If anyone else has any questions about these first basic ones that we've submitted, please enter them in the chat here. I'm going to keep moving, but we will pause and take more questions here in a little bit. All right, so probably one of the newest options that we have available on campus is something called the Forms app, and that's available in mycommunity.ku.edu. Oh, great questions with PDF forms. Students download, complete, send to faculty. Sometimes the information is there, sometimes it isn't. Um, I might have to follow up with you more on that, Jane. So let me do some research and let me also just follow up with you to see exactly what your form is like. All right, so Forms app, that's within my community. It's very similar if you've used Google Forms, very similar to Google Forms. So it's a web-based forms tool. The forms can be accessed. You can either give people a URL like I did today. There's options for built-in options to generate a QR code. And then you can also embed that form on a website. Um, how do you set them up? So any of you, I think it's all turned on for everyone at this point. Maybe I should have double checked, but to set them up, you'll log into mycommunity.ku.edu. You'll click on what's called the app launcher that looks like the little waffle icon in the upper left, and then you'll choose forms. And I'll show you this as well. Um, the results, now this is kind of an interesting thing with this tool. The results are by default stored under an individual's account. So that could be a drawback depending on what you're doing. So the pros, it's very easy to set up, visually appealing. You can have different themes, you can add logos, that type of thing. You can make it anonymous or you can make it so that people have to sign in with a KU Online ID and password or a Microsoft Live account in order to access them. The cons are that the results are under an individual's account and not instead of like a team site or a group storage option. So that could be hard if that person unexpectedly leaves or something like that. You could have a gap in information if you don't kind of take the precautions to change that. And then with the results, it may be harder to summarize the results. You saw kind of, or we'll look at those responses, but you have the ability to export to Excel or to get those visuals right there on the web page, but it could be harder for people to see that, or to just create a PDF report or something. So let me just show you an example of that. So here, when you log into mycommunity.ku.edu, this is the My Community landing page. So this is what you first see. To get to all the different tools, and I'm going to have a few more here than you have, you click on this, what's called the app launcher up in the top left, and then you can click here on Forms. So with these forms, it's very similar to kind of Google Forms. Here are the ones I've set up in the past. That's the one that we just did. If you're creating a new one, you click New, and then basically you give it a title, a description, and then you add your questions. So the limitations here is that there's limited question types. So you can, they do have, this is the quiz type, there's multiple choice, text, ratings, date, that type of thing. You can make it so that there are multiple answers available, which is what we did in the entry kind of survey that we did, or poll. And you can make different ones required. If you have a really complex setup, you can copy those, you can delete them, you can change the order, and then once you're, and then you can change the theme up here. So they got some pretty cute themes. Um, so you can do all that stuff. When you're ready to distribute, you click on Send Form. Down in the right corner, you may not be able to see it if you see my picture, but it says who can fill out this form. That's an important one. The default is only people in my organization, which records the name of responses, but you can either deselect to record the names, or you can make it so that anyone with a link, not sign in required, can fill out the form. If you're going to embed it on a public website, that's probably the way to go, because that way you can get the embed code and you can just put it on that website. You have the option here, download and send QR code, email the link, or you can just copy the link up here. Yeah, so can this form app be used with stakeholders outside of KU? Definitely, as far as um, if you want people outside of KU to be able to answer the questions. So you can definitely do that. As far as the results are stored here. To get access to the results, I believe you need a KU online ID and password, or there could be the option for a Microsoft Live account. But I can open those in Excel and see those different results there. So it's just taking some time, but it doesn't have like the robust feedback that some of the other like survey tool type of solutions have. Um, okay. Similar to that, and this is kind of why it gets confusing, there is a different thing called Excel survey that is available in my community under your individual OneDrive for Business storage space. So with that, you have to log into mycommunity.ku.edu. You have to click on the app launcher and go to your OneDrive space in order to create one. And there you'll say New Excel Survey. The results there again are stored in an individual's OneDrive for Business storage, so sometimes it's not a good option for multiple people, where those results are really kind of owned by a group or a department. These can be used on a mobile device or on a web browser by accessing the URL. They're easy to set up, they're visually appealing, they can be made public and anonymous. The cons, like I said, it can be maybe not a good choice if you don't want it stored under one person's account, and that it may be harder to summarize those results because they'll be in Excel. So let me just show you that one. Um, Again, it is a little confusing. So once I'm in my community, I can click on the app launcher again and click on OneDrive to go there. Once I'm there, and you're going to see a bunch of stuff because I've uploaded a lot of files, but here I can just say New, and then I get this option, Excel Survey. I'll give it a name. And so what this is, it really is an Excel kind of document, but it has this front end that allows me to put a title, description, all that type of thing. I have different questions here, different options, that type of thing. Once I'm ready to share the survey, I can click share here and I'll get different options for sharing. Maybe so I get the option here, and I can just send that to anyone who I want to share the survey with. Oh, do people have to have a My Community account to access the link to the forum on Forms app? Good question. It all depends. They don't have to. It all depends on when I said send form. It all depends, and maybe I should kind of make this so that it's up here. There's this area in the bottom corner here, who can fill out this form. If I want to make it so that anyone can do it, then I need to select this one so that people don't have to sign in order to get to it. That's a good question. Okay. So yeah, it's a little bit confusing. This survey here If I want, this is how I'll see all the entries as they come in this kind of workbook or worksheet. If I want to go back and edit things, there's this little survey button here where I can edit the survey, add more questions, that type of thing. Again, I have the share survey button, and this one, I can just send that to anyone and they should be able to access it. So adding to the confusion, I'm going to cover 4 different ones. So this is the third one within my community. If you had something that you wanted to get feedback, but you wanted those responses to be collected under a team account, it would be called a team site. You could use the survey app and add that to your site. So an app is how you add functionality to sites. In order to add the app, you have to first be the site owner, usually of a site. So once you set up the survey and add it, anyone that has member or contributor permissions or higher can complete the survey. You can make it so that the responses are anonymous. You can make it so that people can only fill out the survey once, that type of thing. It can be a little bit tricky to set up, and out of all of these, it may have the least ability to kind of change the way it looks. So to access the results, the people who need to see the results will need to be site owners of that site, and they'll be able to see those by navigating to that survey app on the site. The pros, the results are stored within the team site. They can be made anonymous. The cons, not as visually appealing, requires logging in to access, which could present some barriers, and the questions can be difficult to set up. So I'm just going to keep moving so we can get to a few of these other ones. InfoPath Forms, that's another one in my community. They're kind of web-based forms that can integrate with lists. The thing about InfoPath Forms is that they're not fully supported on campus, so they are an option, but unfortunately we just don't have the expertise. We don't offer training or many resources, or actually any resources on how to set them up at this point. But that again is one other thing that's in my community. Okay, meeting polling. We're kind of moving into the last ones here. Meeting polling, you've seen an example of this. We did it in this session. There's also polling options in the other kind of online meeting tool, which is Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. So as long as you're in the meeting space, you can contribute to that poll. To access the results, usually presenters can download the results, and then you see them while you're in the meeting. They usually are simple to set up. You get quick feedback. The hard part is, in order to do it in a meeting space, you have to have people get to the meeting space. And maybe if the poll is the only thing you want to do, maybe then that's not really a good option. And like some of you have seen here today, if you're using a tablet, a smartphone, or the link for a Mac version to join the meeting, you won't be able to vote on those poll options. Getting into the fully more robust kind of tools, there is, like many of you are using Qualtrics. Now Qualtrics is designed to be a survey tool. It's a web-based survey tool, so anyone who has the URL to the survey can access that on a computer or a mobile device. I have a preview of one here. To set them up, you need an account. Now, Qualtrics isn't what I would consider centrally supported in that KU doesn't have a central license. So usually what all IT staff can support are the things that KU has purchased a license for. That said, if you are under the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, class does have a license, so your tech staff may be able to help you with that. Or you can apply to get a free license. It has limitations. I believe you can only have 100 responses or something like that. To access the results, you need to have access to Qualtrics and to that survey. You can also set up reports to be emailed. So the pros, it's really sophisticated, but it's pretty easy to use. You can use that kind of logic for skipping or branching of questions. You can get summary stats. You can download those and import them into other programs. You can have this for really large scale kind of things, and you can have that role-based access. The cons, there's limited support because we don't have a central license here at KU. I did go and set up a free account just to show you. I set up a little survey here. The cool thing about Qualtrics is that even, this is sad, it logged me out. Even if you don't have an account centrally, I guess I won't log in here. What you can do in Qualtrics is you can create a free account, and then they have a library of different surveys. So it can be a good starting point just to log in and choose one of their pre-built surveys just to see what kind of questions are asked and which kind of options are provided. There is a survey tool on campus, but its use is mostly just for academic courses, and that's within Blackboard. There's a survey tool. So really, it's really meant just for students in an academic course. They can be provided with that survey through the course. It can be set up by an instructor. You can have anonymous feedback, but the ability to see if all of your students have completed it. There's limited question types. There's no ability to do that kind of logic, and it is just for academic courses. There are other things that are being used on campus. So many of you mentioned doodle polls. It seems like that's kind of the go-to for finding meeting times, the kind of unofficial go-to. I know people are using Google Forms, SurveyMonkey. ORP, I believe, uses Wufoo. So there are different options that people are using. They're just not provided. The licensing isn't provided kind of centrally. So I kind of have the summary statistic here. I kind of boiled it down. Surveys, polls, forms, those options that are centrally supported. The options that are other are usually not centrally supported. So there's also in the realm of polling, there's those iClickers for the classrooms that are usually used with academic courses. Some academic courses are using Top Hat to do that classroom response kind of thing. There's also a free one called Kahoot that I used in a training here on campus that someone else provided. So lots of different options out there. I'll make sure you have these slides as well so you can refer to them. Just to kind of wrap up, you have to really think about what data you want to collect. The solutions I talked about today shouldn't be used for personally identifiable, sensitive information, no social security numbers, no HIPAA-related information, no credit card payment information. If you need something like that, talk to your tech staff. They can work with us in order to find the right option. I mentioned I wouldn't be going through the policies. Really, the experts on conducting research on campus, OARP, they really do a lot of surveys having to do with students, faculty, staff, demographics here on campus. There's also the University of Kansas Human Research Protection Program. And finally, some of the stuff, those forms, can be applied to event registration, but if you're looking to do something like event registration, there's other tools out there. So especially if payment's required, you may want to ask your tech support staff who can help you connect, we can get connected to you. We can help you figure out what the best option is. All right, I'm just doing a couple more slides and then we'll pause for any last questions. Today's session is just one of the many things we do. We have department trainings that we can set up for your department. We have these workshops that are open, or you can sign up for the Quick Learn series at workshops.ku.edu. If you have a specific form or something that you're trying to do, oftentimes if you have that goal in mind, a desk side coaching appointment is a good way to do that. So you can request those. We have our link to our form there, a CMS form, by the way. You saw that one. So we just have a couple of these left this semester. Tennille's doing one in a couple of weeks on PowerPoint tips and tricks. And then first week of December, or maybe it's the second week, we're just doing basics for web using Photoshop. So just the Photoshop very basics. I will be sending out an email. I got some questions to follow up on. I'll include these slides. I'll also include a link to the recording for this session. So we're right at 11:55. That last slide there should have been additional questions. I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'll stick around and Tennille and I will answer them. If not, thank you all for joining us, and keep an eye out for that follow-up email. Hey Billy, I just saw your question. Yeah, Tennille just posted that. I'm gonna have to do some double checking. There's definitely some things within my community, like the forms thing that we did and the Excel survey, that won't be an option for affiliates, I don't believe. But I will double check and find out for sure. Just to clarify, yeah, so Patricia, the CMS form embedded on a website, yes, that's exactly how it can work. They can have it so they can fill it out online, and then it can be sent to you. It can be sent to you and somebody else, multiple people. So as soon as they fill it out, you can get that confirmation through email.